Good evening, everyone. Today we have a super exciting topic to talk about. Let's start from the beginning. I'm super happy to be here. It actually took us half a year from the moment where those people invited me to the moment when I come. So I'm super happy to come. And it's my first time in Prague, so I'm just enjoying the city. Thank you for coming. And today we're gonna talk about security. My name is Anastasiia and I'm a software engineer. I was doing mobile applications since iOS 3 probably, and on some point I realized how much sensitive data users do put into their apps. And we as mobile developers, we mostly don't care. We believe that Apple or Google will handle everything for us. Yeah, but that's not true. So I switched from mobile development to data security, and now I'm working as a product engineer in data security company. And my goal as a product engineer is to make sure that all our cryptographic software is easy to use by developers, so people won't have any reasons not to use it, and will make their apps secure. For example, the open source library Themis I'm working on and maintaining. It's easy. It allows you to use storage encryption, transport encryption. It has two methods: encrypt, decrypt. But even when developers use this kind of large cryptographic library, they approach to me. They ask me questions like, "Hey, Anastasiia, can you please review our mobile app? I see the same mistakes again and again." And let me show you something. This paper was published a year ago, and guys have analyzed near 300 vulnerabilities in the applications and divided those vulnerabilities into two large groups. One group is vulnerabilities caused by bugs inside crypto libraries, right? Inside crypto algorithms, etc., etc. And another group is misusing of crypto libraries. So can you guess a number? Can you guess a number how much, a percentage, how much bugs were inside crypto libraries? Just a number?
0.1.
0.1, no, integer expected? 10? Any more thoughts? No, close enough. 5? More ideas? Any more ideas? 20? Yeah. 17. So 17% of bugs were inside crypto libraries, but majority of issues is due to misusing crypto libraries, due to our developers' hands. And cryptography is not the only source of mistake. Even if developers create their apps with security in mind, don't show sensitive plaintext, attackers can find ways to bypass these security measures just by exploiting architectural weaknesses or by finding unobvious yet very simple vulnerabilities. Encryption is known to be the ultimate data security measure. And high walls, super secure gates. But each system is as secure as the most securest component in it. So if you have super cool encryption, but if you store your key in plain text, the encrypted data is like this picture. It's actually a real photo I took in San Francisco. If someone can steal user password just by showing you a fake screen, your encryption is useless. Okay, so tonight, we're going to talk about all these tiny bits and pieces that you can do in your app to make it more secure. all these easy things before implementing cryptography and before doing really like complicated things. And I have a question for you. Who of you is an iOS developer? iOS developer? Okay, almost half. Who is Android developer? Okay, like a third probably. Backend people? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, I'm just curious. Okay, I'm just curious. So today, among these easy things, why I am asking, because mobile applications, they don't exist in a vacuum. They have the whole infrastructure behind. So when you are doing like mobile app security, we're actually talking about the whole system security, right? And to start with, we will start with handling user secrets with care, input validation, careful logging, handling transport connection, and some tips and tricks that you can use in addition in your apps to confuse attackers. So let's talk about sensitive data. This is a definition from GDPR. I'm sure you know a lot about GDPR. You receive all these shitty emails, right? Oh yes. In short, any data that can identify the user should be protected. Here, I have found a top 10, well, top 5, because I have cut the image. So top 10 reasons for app rejection by Apple during this April. And this is the reason number 3. It's wrong collecting of the data, like bad data collection, bad data storage. The reason number 5, it's also about privacy. It's all about collecting geodata and accessing to geodata. So, first thing in our application flow we'll talk about is privacy. First mistake I often see, and I'm sure you have seen also, is showing sensitive data on your screen when you do the app switching, right? On iOS, when you press the home button and you see the screens of the other apps. And I can name you like 5 bank applications that leak your credit card balance on the screens where you do this app switching. A secret chat application, like secret chat applications that still show your history during app switching. On iOS, it's really easy. It's really easy to implement the thing I show, like the Signal, like Signal does, like Safari in private mode, Chrome in private mode. All you need to do is to implement 2 methods. Application will resign active and add some view, some black view, some image view on your window, and then remove this special view on application will did become active. That's all. Some applications prefer to make a screenshot and to blur a screenshot. It's also okay. What I suggest you, what I advise you, what I recommend you, if in your app you have a screen with sensitive data, I'm sure you do have, please don't show this sensitive data when operating system makes screenshots of your app. Just for one screen. You can put this blurry image, you can put this black screen, but don't reveal the sensitive data during app switching. Okay? Okay? Will you do some kind of things? Yeah? Or no? Do you think it's useless? Who thinks it's useless? Okay, if you think it's useful, you will do it. I even found a library for you. The library is called Screen Shield Kit, and this is closed source. Okay, I don't recommend using it. This is closed source, but people claim that they can intercept any screenshot, any video recording, any QuickTime video recording of your iOS application. We don't know how they did it, because like this is closed source, and I'm just curious, I'm just curious if people actually do this kind of things. And if you feel curious as well, I found a Medium article that explains how to intercept screen recording on iOS, just to make this some kind of bits. And do you remember a blog post by Felix? Hello, Felix. So he wrote a blog post about accessing to the camera. In short, if user has granted permission on iOS application, has granted permission to the camera, the application can make photos from front camera, from back camera, use face detection API, face recognition API, without even showing any camera view to the user. So once you have granted permission to your app to use camera, the application can make photos of you like everywhere using this app. And you know this, like, it's all about permissions, and you know the golden rule of permissions. Don't ask them, like don't get to the data your application don't want to work with. On Android, of course, things are much worse. I don't know how to fix all these permissions, but general rule is avoid asking all this data, like minimize amount of data your application works with. And of course, try to ask these permissions step by step, only in places where you need them. Let's move forward from privacy issues to input and validation. The point of input validation is, when it's done correctly, it can stop numerous attacks you cannot foresee. For example, you might want to limit amount of characters in a mail field, in a name field, but what is more important, that the input validation should happen on every point of your infrastructure where you have this data input. It's not only about mobile app. You should do input validation in mobile, like an iOS app, Android app, and on the server side, where you receive this data from the client. Like everywhere. This picture is not correct. The correct picture is to put all these walls even inside your infrastructure. Of course, when we're talking about input validation, a lot of people think about like password rules. And bad password rules are everywhere. Here, on this picture, they want us to create a custom ID that is from 6 to 12 numbers or letters, but excluding 9. Like, what? Here is a joke about bad password rules, that password should contain emoji, a hashtag, and a video. What? And you know, May the 3rd was World Password Day. So Nutella advised people to use Nutella as a password. Don't use it. And as this tweet says, under absolutely no circumstances, you should take web security tips from a chocolate spread. So don't use word Nutella as a password. Actually, like, I believe it can be cracked in less than in a second. What are good password rules? Like, size matters. Longer passwords will take more time to crack. Basically, that's all. You should not limit what characters to use because you can decrease the entropy level. You should check that passwords are not the typical ones, like QWERTY, password 1, Nutella, God, sex, love, all the things, you know. That's all you need. And of course, promote password managers or password generation tools, because people create really dumb passwords. Let's move in our application flow to the next step, authentication. Do you know the story about Nissan Leaf? Nissan, like cracking Nissan Leaf from iOS application. Do you know the story? Do you want to hear it? Okay, if you... What? If you want, what's the idea behind, what's the story behind? Nissan Leaf, like a car, electric car. The people have created an app, like official app, to control the car. Fortunately, it didn't like control the whole movement, but it allows you to open and close windows, to turn on AC, etc., etc. And as usual, this application was not really secure. So they used non-authenticated API to control cars. What people did, they just read the API and understand that the car ID is something, just a number, just the ID. You can actually brute force. So they go to the parking lot with a lot of Nissan Leafs there, and they started to brute force the car ID and making requests to the server, and eventually they were able to control the windows for the doors of one particular car on this parking lot. What's the morale of this story? If your application is super secure, but your authentication sucks, your application is not secure, and everyone can hack your whole system from the app. How to make authentication flow better? Well, don't ask user passwords all the time. Again, nice blog post by Felix, again about iOS. Recently on iOS you can create the alert, the message box, which looks exactly as like the Apple one. So anyone, any library you use can show a message box to your user asking for user password. And if in your application flow, your apps asks for user password again, and again, users can really easily put their passwords here just because they used to. So the first rule is avoid asking user passwords all the time. Of course, Touch ID, Face ID, multi-factor authentication is much better. I won't explain you why, I'm sure you already know the why. I'm sure you know how to set up Touch ID or Face ID for your apps. If you don't, read these articles. Next, again, the iOS world. Last summer, we got this shiny thing that is called a self authentication session. Have anyone used this thing already? Have you tried? No? Okay, so this is the method that allows you, look on this video. This authenticated session allows you to use OAuth authentication with websites really easy from your Safari. So it's just an easy way to integrate OAuth flow into your app. And of course, like single sign-on, just use single sign-on, and don't forget to ask passwords on sensitive screens. So it's tricky. The trick is don't ask user passwords all the time, but do ask user password when user wants to read some sensitive data or to do some sensitive action in your app. Of course, use password autofill. Starting from iOS 11, we have this nice API. You can set up UI text content type as username or password, and users will see this small key near their text input, and they can choose which account to use. And you can integrate all these things from your application with your website. It's really easy. You only need to add associated domains in your app, and you need to put a special crafted file on your backend, on your server. If you don't know how to do it, just read this link. I have prepared a lot of links for you, okay? I know that you like reading about security. I can see it in your eyes. So I have really a lot of links for you. Just in case, you will have bad weather here and you're like, okay, I will read about security, why not? So, in short, making authentication better, it's super crucial for your application. It means make it less complicated for user, yet continue asking passwords or asking to prove that user is user on sensitive screens. And one more thing, please test your login flow. Do you remember this issue with macOS High Sierra, where you can just press enter and enter, just double enter, and you can log into system under root without password. Please test your login flow. Make sure you don't put debug credentials inside your app. You can use UI tests to cover these kind of test cases for your app, just to make sure, no one can go into your system by double entering. Okay, let's move from authentication to storage. So we already talked about showing sensitive data, about validating input, about authentication, and all these bits and pieces are super crucial because, as I mentioned before, if you do them wrong, your app is not secure. In Ukraine, a few weeks ago, we have a small cybersecurity incident, this small issue. The largest Ukrainian work site, job site called Rabota.ua, sent email to one of these cybersecurity guys with plain text password in email. So the guy has started asking questions, people in Rabota.ua, do you store my password in plain text? And people from Rabota.ua responded no. We use super secure encryption and we encrypt your password. Well, you can guess. You can guess what happens next. Of course, they got cracked. Their super secure encryption got cracked. All this user database with all these passwords were cracked just because they were encrypting passwords, not hashing them, right? They were storing them, okay, not in the plain text, but still. If you use bad encryption, it's the same that you store passwords in plain text. Just one more step, but for security people, it's really easy to crack. Of course, there are plenty of companies that had data leakage. It's not surprising anymore. What surprised me still, that all those companies store secrets in plain text. During last year, at least 14 e-commerce companies, it's only e-commerce, had data leakage. And you know all the stories, right? You know the stories about Uber, you know the stories about Equifax, Cambridge Analytica, all those things. This is not surprising. In cryptography, we call the sensitive plain text, it's not only about passwords. It's not only about passwords and your credit card numbers. It can be anything that allows to identify the user. It can be document pictures. It can be traffic route, navigation route. It can be some identifiers, names, home addresses, license plates, etc., etc. Try not to store all these things. But if you do, if you need to store them, be bold and use a proper encryption. And it's also not about storing. Don't log sensitive data. High Sierra again. So, after allowing anyone to go into your system without a password, just doing double enter, they have security issues again. They actually log a plain text password in a log file. Well, it was found and fixed. But they're not the only one. Twitter also logged plain text passwords. everyone actually is doing the same mistakes again and again. But there is a tool for that. Like this one is called Clouzeur. I am not into French. I believe this is read as Clouzeur. Have you watched Pink Panther movie? So the Inspector Clouzeur. This is the one. This is a tool, this is a static analyzer that actually checks your source code and looks for passwords, credential, keys you may forgot in your code base. Of course, it won't help you if you print a user password like a variable, right? But still, it can help you to remove all the sensitive data from your source. We, like in Kozak Labs, we tried to use it. we did. We added to our continuous integration process, like for every commit, we run this static analyzer to see the results. But the thing is that when you're creating cryptographic software, you have the password and the key as the keywords everywhere in your source code. So this tool just shows us like 300 false positives, and we removed it. But I believe that in your application, not the cryptographic ones, it's really useful. We like open source, but some code should not be published. Like this iBoot code that was published, that was leaked in February. Of course, Apple filed a copyright request and GitHub took it down. But anyway, even if your application is open source, there are some pieces that shouldn't be open source. For example, your keys. There are different key management strategies on mobile application. First one, you can encrypt the keys. Well, I mean, maybe first one is actually you can put all your keys in one file and add it to gitignore, just for the sake of not publishing it. Then when you are using these keys, you can put them in a keychain, for example, but you can put them in a keychain encrypted. Don't put your keys inside your code, because like every binary can be decrypted, debugged, and all your keys can be found. There are two tools from Amazon, from AWS, and from Orta. This one is for iOS, and this one is for everyone. These tools allow you to put your keys, to store your keys in a separate place without committing them. Is it useful for you? Yes? No? Just say me yes or no, be honest. Is it useful for you? Yes. Yes? Okay. Good, good. Then we will continue. And our next stop is transport security. You notice the logic behind, right? We start from the input, and now we're on the transport layer. Well, on iOS, you already know all the things. I won't talk with you about Apple transport security. I haven't heard that Apple will reject applications that do allow HTTPS. I haven't heard. Maybe sometime in the future it will happen. So I encourage you to use HTTPS. I encourage you to have this, like, to disable arbitrary loads completely, or to enable them only for web. But this is easy. All of you, like iOS developers, already know all the things. Let's move to SSL. Everyone uses SSL. But remember to configure it correctly. Use long private keys. Obtain certificate from reliable certificate authority. Use strong cipher suite. Try to use TLS 1.3 if it works for you, if you can support it. If not, at least use TLS 1.2. If you have a website, you can use HSTS header for browsers to understand that your website works on like HTTPS only. Because you know, one of these popular attacks, when you attacker says to the server that, sorry, I'm old school browser, I don't support HTTPS. And the server downgrades to HTTP, and now communication is like in plain text. So to avoid this kind of vulnerability, If you have a website, just tell your browsers to use HTTPS every time. My favorite part is SSL pinning. Please raise your hands who has implemented SSL pinning in your app. Well, like 15 maybe? Okay, people, why don't you implement SSL pinning? Is it so complicated? No. If you don't know about SSL pinning at all, please read this OWASP pinning cheat sheet. But in short, you can pin the whole certificate, you can pin the public key. On iOS, it's really easy, like there is LIBS for that, right? Just a few lines of code to pin public keys using a llama file, but you can also use, like, you can create your own code, you can use any other library. I always receive questions like what to do if my certificate will expire soon. There are a few strategies how to solve it. So first of all, when you obtaining SSL certificate, you can get certificates that will be active, not today, but in a month, for example. So today you can obtain a certificate that will start working on 1st of July. In this case, in your app, you can put several certificates, current one and future one, and maybe future number 2 and maybe future number 3, like Google does in Chrome. So you pin several certificates in your app, and when one of them, and you make these checks. If this certificate is from server, no, else. If this one on your server, when certificate will expire, you just activate this, like, future 1, then future 2, then future 3. And now your application, like, with every update of your app, you put new certificates there. Is it clear? Have you used this kind of approach? No? Okay. Then tell me what kind of approach do you use. I mean, maybe your application just stops working when certificate is expired. One of the approaches probably. But SSL is centralized system. Do you remember the WOSIGN story? WOSIGN is certificate authority from China, and they have this they're being bad famous because suddenly you can obtain a totally valid SSL certificate from WOSIGN, but when you are not a domain owner. So one guy has obtained certificate for test.github.com, not being an owner of github.com. Why it is bad? Because you rely on SSL and suddenly someone can obtain totally valid certificate for your site and decrypt all the connections. Of course, when we are talking about, like, usual people, it might be complicated, but 2 years ago, Google, Apple, and Mozilla stopped working with WOSIGN. And you might know that in China or in Kazakhstan, they have this, like, governmental rules about the internet, and they have their own certificate authority. So if you are someone from the government, for example, of China, you can go to your certificate authority and say to them, please give me a certificate for google.com. And this certificate will be totally valid from technical perspective. And these countries can make this governmental man in the middle for your application. This is why SSL pinning is so important, but doesn't solve the whole issue. Sometimes when your app works with really sensitive data, you might want to add additional level of encryption. In this example, I'm showing famous secure session, which is a secure channel based on WebSockets between your application and the server, or your application and another application. You can just set up keys and start the session, and you will get end-to-end encryption, strong cipher suite, perfect forward secrecy, and it works well on at least 8 different platforms. So well, I'm obviously biased, okay? I'm maintaining all the things. I'm obviously biased, but if your application really works with sensitive data and you want to control the transport encryption on your own, you can add extra layer of encryption above SSL. Dependencies. Xcode Ghost. Do you recognize the Xcode Ghost? Do you remember the Xcode Ghost story? No? You see, I'm doing these security talks really entertaining, having some technical tips and stories. So, Xcode Ghost. Well, Xcode is ADE for iOS development, okay? Just for Android people. So, Xcode is really huge. When you're downloading your version of Xcode, you need to download like 5 or 6 gigabytes. It takes you ages. In China, they have this golden firewall and bad network connection inside the country. So what they do, someone is downloading Xcode inside China, and then they put it on the torrents. So like other people can download Xcode from torrents. Good idea. Bad from security perspective. Because someone has put a malicious code inside Xcode. And for developers in China downloaded this malicious Xcode, which is named Xcode Ghost, and they didn't recognize the difference. Because for developers, there was no difference. Only when they pack the binary to upload it to the App Store, this malicious Xcode injected malicious code into the applications. This code actually steals the user data. So for developers, there were no any chance to understand that they are working in malicious IDE. Of course, only one of the strategies was to get this compiled application, to decompile it, and to check if this is the code you actually wrote. But I mean, who does that? Like, almost nobody. When Apple recognized that some applications are infected, they just drop them from the store and they add additional checks to the Xcode. The moral of this story is don't download software from sources you cannot trust. And if you're downloading any library, any binary SDK, any tool from non-secure channel, there is a chance that someone can intercept this connection and inject something malicious into your library. First of all, think if you really need to add this library to your code. Then there is another super awesome blog post by Felix about techniques how to intercept libraries when someone is sitting near you and downloading some of the libraries. Because some Cocoa pods are served as HTTP, not HTTPS. So anyone can intercept them. When you are downloading the library, check the server certificate. Check the hash sum. Then it's better to compile library from source code on your own than to download the binary, right? And of course, now we all are under GDPR. And it's our responsibility what data do we share to these libraries, and it's up to us to control this data. And of course, it's our responsibility to check the critical bugs and vulnerabilities in libraries we are using, to fix them and to update these libraries. There is a tool for that. Now it's really there are really popular tools for checking your open source libraries. You know that GitHub has security alerts. When you add in some open source library in GitHub, it can show you like, hey, sorry, this library has vulnerability. But it works only for Ruby, JavaScript, and Python, I believe. On NPM, like Node.js package manager, they have recently added the command called audit. So you can press npm, you can put npm audit, and it will check all the libraries you have for the vulnerabilities. These two tools works in a similar way. You add them as a plugins to your continuous integration server, and they check the libraries you are using, the open source, of course, libraries you're using, and they also check these open CVE databases, the databases of open vulnerabilities. And if they found that library you're using is known to have vulnerabilities, they show you like, hey, please update the library, or they can even show you the commit of this library where this vulnerability was fixed for you to put it in your code base. As far as I know, white source has some integration with iOS and Android. Snyk, if I understand correctly, they work well with server-side platforms. I asked them on Twitter, like, hey people, do you support iOS or Android? But they just ignore my question, so Snyk people, I would advertise you, but now, Other fun things to do. I see you're a little bit tired, so we'll speak about fun things. When I talk about key protection, my colleagues often think about obfuscation. And you can obfuscate a lot of things. Like, what is the primary goal of obfuscation? It's not a security measure. So if you have a choice and time to implement SSL pinning, to implement proper encryption, or to do obfuscation, the obvious choice is to make real security measures. But if you want to do some fun, if you want to have some fun, if you already implemented all the security things, but want to make the cracker's life complicated, you can do obfuscation. So, what are the usual approach? You can obfuscate keys, you can obfuscate XIBs and LIBS, UI files. Why? I know one product, like macOS application, that people always steal the binary, decompile the binary, steal this XIBs and LIBS file, and create their own application using these UI files, but a malicious one, and put it to the store. So this is one of the products of company I cannot say you, but they decided to obfuscate XIBs and LIBS. You can basically how you can obfuscate things. You can put files like hex variables, you can replace some characters, you can rename. Instead of naming like my certificate, you can rename it to MP3, for example. It's up to you. It's up to you what techniques to use. And of course, there are some tools for that. There are some special libraries you can use to obfuscate all your code. I'm sure that Android people are into obfuscation more, right? Hey, Android developers, do you usually obfuscate your code? Yes. Yeah? Hey, iOS developers, do you usually obfuscate your code? No. That's what I thought. Okay, of course, there are plenty of other things to do for your whole infrastructure, like set up firewalls, set up intrusion detection systems, use CM. Do you know what is CM? Who knows what is CM? No old school people here. Okay, so CM, sorry. So CM is a system of log analyzing and event management. Basically, you put all your logs from your infrastructure services, from your application, into one place, into one system, and you set up a set of rules how to react on some particular logs, right? It's all about monitoring, it's all about alerting. Of course, you can use honeypots and fake targets. Do you use honeypots? Do you know what is honeypot? I say, yeah, two people. I mean a digital honeypot, okay? Not a real one. So the honeypot is an idea to confuse attacker. Because when someone wants to understand how your application is working, and you are a good developer, You create really good code, really human-readable code. It can be easy to understand what this code does. Honeypot is something attractive in your infrastructure, in your code base, that attracts attackers, but it's not real, it's fake. For example, you can put your real encryption key somewhere in a keychain, but in a playlist file, in some string file, you can just write a fake key. So attackers can use this fake key, they will see it first, they can use this fake key, and it's up to you on the server side to detect, hey, someone is using fake key, I should drop this kind of clients. I know the application that has free mode and pro mode, and they had a simple method to check if user has paid. The method was like, check if user is pro, and it returns true or false. Basically, if attacker will find this message in your code and change true to false, which can be easily done through the hex editor, he will receive this pro access. What you can do in your app to put a fake target, this method is a fake target that you won't use, and to name the real method in some more complicated way, not so obvious. So these are honeypots or fake targets. Poison records is something similar. Poison records is strings or binaries in your databases that no one should read. So in your typical application flow, you will never ever read this record, this line, this column, this cell in your database. And when someone is reading this data, it means that someone is attacking your system. And again, it's up to you to use logging, to use intrusion detection to understand that, hey, someone is reading poison record. That's not good, that's not good, let's stop this behavior, let's block their IP, for example. Okay, so remember, if you do complicated things right, but fail in easy things, you're fucked up. About complex things. In cryptography, well, cryptography is not complex, trust me. In cryptography, we are talking about storage encryption, transport encryption, and key management. And of course, there is a lib for that. Depending on your needs, you can select a proper library. Actually, when talking about storage encryption, you can use any good IAS wrapper. If you need integrity checks, I recommend you using libsodium, like NHCL libsodium, if you are able to compile it for your system, because you may have some problems with compilation libsodium. Or you can use some general purpose libraries like the one I maintain, Themis. We have support of iOS and Android. If you want to have some proper transport encryption, there are two different methods. We have a lot of existing protocols and algorithms and libraries that solve some narrow use cases, like OTR kits. It solves one of the chatting use cases, like Signal protocol. It also solves the end-to-end encrypted messages use case. If you want to use some general purpose cryptography while doing transport encryption, there are not so many options, like Themis. If you feel brave, you can use any standard library of your language, of your ecosystem. But most of these libraries is just a collection of crypto algorithms. It's just a collection of crypto primitives. And if you are not a cryptography expert, if you don't understand the difference between IAS in CBC mode and IAS in GSM mode, if you don't know what is padding and what padding to use for symmetric encryption for your selected IAS mode, this can lead you to Oracle padding attack. If you don't know how to generate key and what should be a key length, I don't recommend you using all those collection of algorithms, because there are so many things when you can make a mistake. There are plenty of existing libraries that solves these things for you. Or you can have an internal security team, or you can ask somebody who knows cryptography to help you. Okay, so let's wrap up. Do you remember T-Mobile Twitter? Someone in T-Mobile asked, someone in Twitter asked, "Hey T-Mobile, do you store my password in a plain text?" And of course they responded, yes, of course we store them, because, well, you know, you need this password to log in. And of course people like, wait, how? But if your infrastructure will go broken, got cracked? And T-Mobile responded, no. It doesn't happen because our security is amazingly good. You can guess what happens next. Of course, they were hacked. And this is the alert. What if this doesn't happen because our security is amazingly good on their website? So, pro tip for you. Don't say that your security is amazingly good, because there is no such thing as amazingly good security. Everything can be broken sooner or later. Don't attract too much attention. So, to summarize, today we talked about controlling the whole data flow. You should understand what kind of data you collect. And don't collect the data you don't need. Try not to store the data, but if you do it, be bold, use a nice encryption method. Don't log the data. Test your login flow. Don't use this easy-to-break encryption, right? Understand what you're doing. Remove data as fast as you can. Keep an eye on your dependencies. Monitor all the things. Monitor suspicious behavior. Use these intrusion detection systems. Use SSL pinning. Analyze the system. Find the easiest piece you can break, make it stronger. Find another easy piece, make it stronger. This was a small, super simple checklist of things people usually forget about, concentrating on more complicated things. But if you do these easy things bad, your system is not secure. And of course, I have some links for your home reading. In this presentation, I counted, right? I put near 50 different links. Of course, some of these links are just on the Twitter pictures, but maybe 40, maybe 35 of those links are actually useful, security-related or privacy-related blog posts, and it's useful for everyone, for iOS developers, for Android developers, and of course, we will share slides, so you'll be able to put on them and to read all the things. And now, more links. I actually do, not really often, but I do the security talks. So if you're interested about key management for mobile or about building zero-knowledge architecture, just watch my talks or ask me. And now we have time for questions. And I have 3 nice Ukrainian chocolate for best questions. So, do you have any questions? How I can understand that you have any questions? Will you read them for me?
Not a question, but rather a commentary regarding, for example, the topic of using the future certificates. This is an amazing idea, but it's not always possible because of reasons that you can't solve by yourself. For example, a client is always hesitant to purchase a new. The client is hesitant or lacks money, lacks some motivation to purchase future certificates. or to purchase them from a trusted authority, and users simply cannot put those certificates into your application. So the only, we actually have in our project such approach. The only reason we can solve this by preparing an application and implement the force upgrade feature. It's like the only workaround, which is
you're showing some like screen. Please update.
Yeah, the application is not usable unless you upgrade. And regarding plaintext passwords, this is a really common issue.
I know it.
And sometimes, if you work on the project, which is like a gateway, which connects to a backend, but backend for some reason uses those plaintext passwords. So there is no way for you to solve this issue. Those are the real life problems which are good to be resolved, but they cannot.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. You can just say that, hey, backend developers are bad. We will have not secure application. Well, I can relate to that. On one point in my career, when I was making iOS applications, and I had so like bad luck with backend developers, my choice was to switch to the backend side and to do things in a way I believed it was correct. Right, so I understand your struggles. Maybe when you want to add some security things to your app, but you understand that it's not like that. Maybe customer doesn't have money or time for that. You can always think from business perspective, like how much money it would take them if someone will crack the app, if the data breach occurs. What are the reputational risks? Because like the things like Cambridge Analytica, right? What will happen if someone will break the app, break the system, and put it as a like news #1 everywhere? How much the business will, how much money they will need to put into solving this case, right? So you can also always measure in money how much money it would take to rewrite the system, to make it more complicated. If it's really more than to add some small SSL pinning right now, sometimes it works. But thank you for your comment. Do we have any more questions, comments, etc.? Yeah? Because this screen is black. Yeah, just.
Okay. I think I will screen, okay?
Okay, you can use the microphone.
And as actually the first question on slide is very nice. As iPhone user and not the programmer or coder or anything, this is quite interesting to me, but probably not for all of you.
Just take a microphone.
Where to store encryption key on iOS? Okay. Where to store encryption key on iOS?
Well, the usual answer is to store the key in a keychain. However, storing something in a keychain, you trust the vendor, you trust Apple. And if device is jailbroken, everything from a keychain can be read. So it's up to you how to define the security, like security requirements in your app. Sometimes it's okay to store keys in a keychain. Sometimes when you're making Instagram for cats, it's totally okay to forget everything and don't implement any security measures. Okay, so it depends on use case. But if you really work with sensitive data, if your application is the entry point for your infrastructure, maybe you should not rely on Apple tools. And maybe you can store the encryption key in a keychain, but in an encrypted way. Where to store encryption key for encrypted key? That's easy. You can generate it in runtime. So basically, you can use depending on your use case. Sometimes you can derive a key from some user properties, from user input key, for example. Sometimes you can derive a key from something artificial, like dividing 72 by 10 and taking 10 last digits of it, or 10 first digits of it. And of course, when you create this key in this way, you should use KeyDF, a key derivation function, something to make a key stronger. So the short answer is keychain. The long answer is, if you don't trust Apple, add additional layers of encryption. Let's move to the next one. Yeah, please. You're just so light.
If you are shy and don't ask questions, please do it on Slido, #mDevTalk. Okay, we are going to start civil war with this one. Do you use Android or iOS?
Android for iOS?
Yes, Android or iOS.
Oh, yeah, sure. I am iOS user. I had really bad experience with Android, but as soon as I'm making, sorry for that, as soon as I'm working on cryptography library, I support both like iOS and Android. I'm not an Android fan. I had really bad times with it, but I can code in Java, but I'm iOS user.
Okay, thank you. Another one, what is the most secure way how to transfer username and password to server in login request? Like query, header, server body, or use SSL version 1.3?
Well, of course, TLS 1.3, but if you use TLS 1.3 and still pass your password as a plain text, it's probably a bad idea. So the good idea is to make something with this password on your client side. Hash it. Hash it and use KDF. Just don't pass it in a plain text to the server side. Then, if you're using GET request and put these credentials in GET request, it's also a bad idea, right? It's better to use, like, if you're using REST API, it's better to use POST request and put these things into POST body, and maybe you want to encrypt them again. Talking about like header, put them in a header. No, I wouldn't say so. I think the industry proven approach is use POST requests, right? Just say yes. Better say yes. Yes. So don't use GET requests. Don't put passwords in the plain text. If you are using some kind of web browser, well, it's up to you. But if you share this credential with third-party libraries or some third-party code, be brave, because it can be leaked through this third party. So this login form is something you should really pay attention on. Maybe not now, but I can tell you about zero-knowledge proof protocol that is very useful when we're talking about authentication. But I think we are running out of time for my time slot. So zero-knowledge proof protocol only for those who will be interested during like our networking and chit-chatting.
Okay, but there's a last one, and I think this is interesting for you. Which one of the Cossack products is the most used?
It depends. Like, you know, like a good coach, I will answer you, it depends. As soon as most our things are open source, sometimes it's complicated to understand who actually uses them. And as soon as we do cryptographic software, we don't put any analytics inside, because it's kind of ridiculous. I mean, when you're using some cryptographic software, you should be sure that it doesn't post a lot of things on our servers. I think the most used product is this Themis. Well, it depends on how we calculate, by users or by companies. By companies, it's Themis, this library, because it's a library, it's free and open source, and has this a lot of wrappers for many languages. So usually it's used for the whole infrastructure. When we're talking about real users, we have some companies now, we work with them, like medical companies, hospitals, that do integrate our products inside, but I can't calculate how many real patients are using these things. I don't have this kind of data. Is it all our questions?
Yes, I think.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
If you have any other questions, so regarding our peer session, or is it called something like networking session?
Wait.
Okay.
I still need 1 minute, okay? Okay. I want to give away this chocolate. So, which question do you like the most? Okay, which question do you like at all? Is there any question you enjoyed?
I think according to Slido there is
Okay, there's some
question.
rating.
Yes, according to Slido, this one.
Okay, so which one of the Kozak products is the most used? Who is the author of this question? I have a chocolate for you. Okay, I have a chocolate for you.
Okay, we got anonymous number 1.
Anonymous number 1. See, this is called social engineering. So, in order to get this chocolate bar, this person have de-anonymized himself. Who wants to get another one chocolate bar? But thank you for your question. So, more chocolate. I'm exchanging your chocolate for your private data, you see.
Okay, I think if you are very shy or want to say anonymous, you can contact Anastasiia during the network session.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.